Chapter 1. The Golden Calm. The Houston sun was a relentless spectator, hanging heavy and golden over Vesper Avenue. For Reba Hart, a woman whose life had been a series of tactical maneuvers and emotional firefighting, the heat was a familiar companion. It felt like a warm blanket, or perhaps a heavy weight, depending on the day. Today, however, was a rare day of smooth sailing. Reba sat on her porch, a glass of iced tea sweating in her hand. For the first time in years, the house behind her was quiet. Kira had moved back in. Cheyenne was glowing with the news of a second pregnancy, and Barbara Jean, blessedly, hadn't darkened the doorway in 72 hours. In the world of Reba Hart, this was as close to a miracle as one could get. Smooth sailing around here is as rare as eyeglasses on a cartoon rabbit, she muttered to herself, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. The peace was shattered, as it always was, by the sound of a heavy-duty SUV pulling into the driveway and the exuberant, somewhat clumsy entrance of Van Montgomery. Van, the former star kicker, her son-in-law, and currently her junior partner in real estate, bounded up the steps. He was wearing a basketball uniform that looked 3 sizes too small for his broad frame. "Hey, Mrs. H," he shouted, his voice echoing off the siding. "That bungalow on Vesper? Open house Saturday. We gotta get the Douglas family over there. They're perfect for it." Reba sighed, the golden calm evaporating like mist in the Texas heat. "Van, the Douglas family is dumber than a 5-pound sack of stupid, and besides, I'm taking Saturday off. I'm seeing a movie with Kira." "But Mrs. H," Van pleaded, his eyes wide. "Things are good. Everyone's happy. We should be making dough while the sun is shining. We could go to the open house on horseback. I'll wear a thong and sing 'I Feel Like a Woman' at the top of my lungs." Reba stared at him, a deadpan expression fixed on her face. "Van, snap out of it. You're scaring the neighbors and the livestock." Yet, beneath her sharp wit, Reba felt a flicker of unease. She knew her family. She knew that when things were too good, it usually meant the storm was just over the horizon, gathering strength. Chapter 2. The Suds of Rebellion. The storm arrived sooner than expected, and it came in the form of an 18-year-old girl and a bottle of domestic lager. Kira Hart had always been the observer, the one with the sharp tongue and the dark eyeliner, who watched her family's antics with a mixture of disdain and weary affection. But turning 18 had shifted something in her. She was no longer a child to be managed. She was an adult in the eyes of the law, even if she was still a warden's prisoner in her mother's eyes. Reba walked into the kitchen later that afternoon to find Kira sitting at the table, casually tipping back a beer. "What are you doing?" Reba asked, her voice dropping into that dangerous, low register that usually signaled an impending lecture. "Having a beer," Kira replied coolly, or as us kids say, "It's all good." "Don't get smart with me, young lady," Reba snapped. "Since when do you drink beer?" "Come on, Mom, I'm 18. Which means it's not child abuse if you slap me, but it also means I can make my own choices." The argument escalated quickly, a familiar dance of rules versus rebellion. But the real blow came when Kira revealed the source of her newfound freedom. "Dad and Barbara Jean let me," Kira said, a triumphant glint in her eyes. "They said as long as I drink at home and they're there, it's okay. They're not the wardens, Mom." Reba felt the familiar heat of frustration rising in her chest. Brock and Barbara Jean, the duo she often described as dumber than a 10-pound sack of stupid. She marched over to Brock's house, her heels clicking a rhythmic war drum on the pavement. Inside the suburban palace that Barbara Jean had decorated in what Reba called early insanity style, she found her ex-husband and his wife looking far too pleased with themselves. "Are you two insane?" Reba demanded. "No, we're bored," Barbara Jean chirped, oblivious to the storm clouds on Reba's face. "You let Kira drink beer?" "She's a child." "She's 18, Reba," Brock said, trying to adopt a voice of reason that he rarely possessed. "We made a deal. It's a way to have control. If we trust her, she'll make the right choices." "You're her parents, not her drinking buddies," Reba shouted. "Things are going to be different. I'm putting my foot down. No more beer. No more letting rules slide. And for the love of all that is holy, no more parenting advice from magazines you found in a bar. Chapter 3. The Wheelchair Fraud. While the women of the Hart family were locked in a battle of wills, Jake was embroiled in a crisis of a completely different nature. Reba had noticed Jake acting strangely nervous, secretive, and wearing brand new basketball shoes that never seemed to get dirty. When she sneaked down to the community center to watch his practice, she didn't find him running drills. She found him in a wheelchair. "Jake?" she whispered from behind the bleachers. The boy was incredible. He was sinking baskets from the three-point line, maneuvering the chair with a grace he never showed on his own 2 feet. The coach was shouting, "Great job, Wheels." The realization hit Reba like a physical blow. Her son, her clumsy, sweet Jake, had joined a wheelchair basketball team. And he wasn't exactly handy-capable. Back at home, the confrontation was inevitable. Van, acting as a sort of makeshift mentor or co-conspirator, was the one to break the ice. "Jake, dude," Van said, sitting him down. "I saw you at practice. You're a handicapped fraud." "It happened by mistake," Jake cried. "I was just goofing off. I sat in the chair, and I realized I couldn't miss. For the first time in my life, I'm an inspiration. Girls want to push me home, Van." "You're an inspiration based on a lie," Reba interjected, walking into the room. "You can't stay on that team, Jake. It's cheating." "But I can't just quit." Van, ever the genius of the family, came up with a plan. "Really sick. With spina colada." "Spina colada?" Reba asked, rubbing her temples. "You want to tell people my son has a tropical cocktail? It sounds medical, Mrs. H. Trust the process." Chapter 4. The Offer. Amidst the domestic chaos, a professional bombshell was about to drop. Van Montgomery had always been loyal to Reba. She had taken him in when his own parents had turned their backs on him. She had taught him the real estate trade. But Van was also ambitious, and the Van dog was starting to feel the itch for something bigger. The call came from Steve Norris of Norris Realty, a giant in the Houston market. "Van, we want you," Steve had said. "Company car with heated seats, high-end client list, a salary that would make your head spin." Van spent 3 days hiding the flowers and steaks that Norris sent as persuasion. He knew that telling Reba he wanted to leave would be like telling a captain he was jumping ship during a hurricane. "Cheyenne, I can't do it," Van whispered to his wife one night. "The car has heated seats. It feels like someone has already been sitting there." "It's plush." "Just talk to her, Van," Cheyenne said, though she was distracted by her own burgeoning going-good blues, a deep-seated anxiety that her life was finally too perfect and therefore doomed to explode. When Van finally gathered the courage, the conversation didn't go as planned. He waited until Reba was in a good mood, which usually meant after she'd had a moment of peace. "Mrs. H," Van began, his voice trembling. "Steve Norris, he made me an offer." Reba went still. She looked at the man who had become a son to her. She saw the ambition in his eyes and the fear. "Is it an offer you want to take?" she asked softly. "Yes," Van whispered, "but I sworn my loyalty to you. I'm a heart partner for life." "Van," Reba said, her voice cracking just a little. "I was fine before I hired you. I'll be fine now. If this is what you want, you have my blessing." But as Van walked away, Reba felt the smooth sailing end for good. She wasn't just losing a partner, she was losing her right-hand man. And in the world of real estate, that meant war. Chapter 5. The Jablonski House. The professional split between Reba and Van turned ugly faster than a Texas thunderstorm. Within 48 hours, they were bickering over client lists and office supplies. "Those are my clients, you knucklehead," Reba shouted as Van tried to download the database. "I worked those clients, Mrs. H. I got that farmer fat because of my closer stare." The tension culminated in a high-stakes challenge. Reba, never one to back down, threw down the gauntlet. "You want the client list, Van? Fine. We'll have a contest. First one to sell a house gets the list." "Interested like a fox," Van shouted. "What house?" "The Jablonski house," Reba said, a predatory smile crossing her face. Van's face went pale. The Jablonski house was a legend in the local real estate community. It was located directly under the flight path of the Houston airport. It had 2 bathrooms, a kitchen from 1974, and walls that vibrated so hard during takeoff that pictures would fly off the mantel like startled birds. "Some say it can't be sold," Reba whispered, "and I'm one of those some." The next week was a blur of desperate marketing. Van tried to sell the vibration as a built-in massage feature. Reba tried to convince a couple that the smell of jet fuel was the scent of adventure. In the end, Van found a client, a Mr. Maguire, who was looking for a house for his elderly, hard-of-hearing father.